Howdy everyone. After checking out Vanilla Faction's expanded pirates recently, I wondered how far I might be able to get with the custom starting scenario and all of the pirate curses enabled. There are 18 in total, with some being essentially free and others completely game-changing. Here they all are, if you want to check them out yourself, but to name a few of the bigger ones, all animals explode when they die, shooting and melee attacks are faster, mining yields gold instead of the normal resources, and damage, moods, and hunger are all doubled. On top of that, each curse adds 1 day between major threat events. Now, let's get into it. This scenario starts off with various pieces of the ship crash landing on a river island. Some of those pieces just so happen to land on a few alpacas which died, and, of course, exploded, starting quite a large fire. Taking stock of the situation, I see that 3 of the crew have landed safely, albeit a bit sick, but the crypto sleep casket containing our 4th and final member is currently engulfed in flames. Just a few steps away from that is our chem fuel tank. I definitely don't want either of those things being damaged or blowing up respectively, so I set to put the fires out and pull Romeo out of the casket. Fortunately, because beating fires out is essentially a melee action, the increase in speed and damage helps us put the fires out rather quickly. Meanwhile, Aguilar, who is incapable of firefighting, is currently handling our ship's volatile engine, which, if not deconstructed, would set off a colony-ending explosion within a few hours. From there, I set the crew to salvage some of the remaining supplies from the wreckage, notably medicine, nutrient paste, and our initial infusion of steel and components. Then start doing more of the normal setup you'd see in any other colony. Setting up a stockpile, turning the nearby ruins into a makeshift shelter, starting a small farming plot, etc. Now seems like a good time to take note of the ship's gauntlet turret sitting just north of the farm plot. Although I did consider using it, I largely ignored it during the run, because I didn't really intend to shoot anything more than I absolutely had to. Any combat that isn't completely one-sided in our favor is going to be very deadly for the crew. At this point I have 3 primary concerns. The first is food. Our starting supplies won't last forever, farming is slow, and hunting is a lot more dangerous when all the animals explode. Who would have thought? So I wanted to make sure that what we did have didn't spoil. Fortunately, our ship's reactor is still providing us 1700 watts of power, so I set up a very small freezer just nearby. Oh, and let's not forget the Curse of Gluttony, doubling our rate of hunger. My second concern is of mood. With the Curse of the Mind doubling all mood thoughts, even moods that are typically fairly minor can be devastating. It didn't really change the way that I play at all, I just wanted to make note of it again. The last major concern is steel. While we're setting up shop right next to a vein of compacted steel, thanks to the Curse of Greed, mining it would yield gold. Instead, I've got to be a bit more creative about what we have and really scrimp until I can guarantee I've got some kind of supply line. This is where I made my first big mistake. I think I should have prioritized getting a smelter going, so I could salvage the bits of metal laying around the map. I did end up doing this a bit later, but not before cutting it way too close with my existing supply. Within the first few days, the crew had a functional one-room building with most of the facilities necessary to get by, but food was starting to run low. With the crew having eaten through their initial nutrient paste and our crash-landing alpaca meat, it was time to do some hunting. I drafted our 3 range combatants and set out to bag some deer. This turned out to be an interesting game of shooting an animal from a safe distance, then undrafting everyone to run up and put the fires out before the animal's body was burnt away to nothing. I think on the whole this failed more often than it succeeded. Oftentimes, no thanks to our incredibly poor accuracy from Curse of the Eye Patch, the animal would be wounded and bleed out after sending my hunters back to base to fulfill their other needs. The subsequent fire would then destroy the animal and the surrounding area before I could get around to dealing with it, if I even could. The other option that would normally be available is taming and then slaughtering animals. Unfortunately, to slaughter an animal you have to be next to it. When it gets slaughtered, it dies. When it dies, it explodes. Understandably, that's not a situation my crew wanted to put themselves in. So, I stuck to the hunting, however inefficient it might have been. More of the usual RimWorld progress ensued from there. I set up a small storage shed and set out to improve our facilities, with the goal of upgrading from wood to stone so that a random rat blowing up on our island didn't burn down the entire colony. As the local deer population began to run low, I made my second major mistake of the playthrough, by deciding to primarily hunt muffalo. I remember that muffalo have a 0% revenge chance from taming, and completely forgot that they have a 10% hunting revenge chance. Surely that won't come back to bite me, right? As time went on and our initial optimism wore off, the negative mood started to come in fierce. Romeo was at major risk of a mental break as a result of many things, but primarily the fact that he kept trying and failing to put the moves on Aguilar. Meanwhile, Bishop is very upset that Aguilar insulted him by calling him a pirate. I guess he's as full of self-loathing as the rest of us are. I set to improve their moods by moving them out of the barracks and into individual bedrooms. As I was doing so, a bulk goods trader showed up, and I was able to put the Curse of Greed to incredibly good use. I mined our chunks of compacted steel bit by bit, trading the gold they yielded for components, steel, cloth, and a ton of raw meat. Unfortunately, I didn't have my storage configured the way I thought I did, so most of that raw meat ended up rotting away in the shed rather than waiting in the freezer to be processed into meals. In spite of that, we had built up a decent stockpile of packaged survival meals, and as we rounded day 20, we were ready for our first raid. As a raiding-based ideology, the Cursed Pirates would suffer a crippling -24 mood if they went 25 days without raiding, but an elating +24 mood for 25 days after a raid. Therefore, it was inevitable that we'd have a raid at some point. Given the general lack of major threats on our home tile, I thought the raiding would likely be the most dangerous part of the run. Truth be told, it was fairly uneventful. We targeted a logging camp run by 2 tribals, and killed one of them before the other ran off. We hauled back their mechanoid slag for more steel and called it a day. On the way back home, however, a dry thunderstorm struck the home tile. The flames that followed encroached on the still wooden parts of the base alarmingly quickly, but we were able to get back to the map and stomp them out before anything disastrous happened. The very next day, on what I thought was a routine muffalo hunting trip, there was a bit of an incident. I got a harsh reminder that muffalos do indeed have a hunting revenge chance. No big deal, I thought. It's slowed across the river and we can safely kite away from it. In my hubris, I waited just a little too long and it got a nip at Romeo, which proved to be deadly. 3 swift, stun-locking attacks were enough to put him out of commission completely. Bishop and Skye then spent the next hour running for their lives and taking occasional shots before managing to kill it off. As an overworked colony of 4, losing any member of the crew was a devastating blow, but we gave him a proper burial and moved on as best we could. Romeo handled a lot around the base, but he was primarily our cook. With him gone, my choices were to risk food poisoning or take the guaranteed mood loss from eating nutrient paste. The next 10 days or so went surprisingly well. Nobody ended up getting food poisoning, and we safely handled our first major threat in a while, a single pigskin with a club. Survival was still a struggle though, and our food supply was running as low as ever as we approached winter. Then, on day 33, we had a midnight raid comprised of a single raider with a plasteel mace. The Curse of Darkness left me as a player completely blind to the state of the map. I knew the general terrain, of course, but it was going to be difficult to tell whether the crew had a good line of sight, where my traps were set up, and how close the raider was to being a major threat. I had Bishop and Skye let off their initial volley as Eek, the raider, crossed the river. I attempted to lure him over the single trap I had constructed in the area, and tried to leave plenty of time for the crew to cross the river before he got too close. Unfortunately, I once again waited just a little bit too long and Eek took down Bishop with a single swing. Devastated by the loss of another crew member, I sent Skye across the river and tried to line up some more shots. I paused and stepped away from the game for a little while, and when I came back, I was surprised to see that Aguilar was also dead. I checked her combat logs. When Bishop had died, his pet rat, which was also named Romeo, went into a man-hunting rage and killed Aguilar in 2 hits. Though Eek the Raider now fled to the edge of the map, a greater threat crossed the river, Romeo the Rat. With Skye as the last remaining member of the crew, she took her final stand and succumbed to the weight of the curses inflicted upon them. Though a man in black arrived to save the colony, he too was no match for Romeo. The crew lay dead in and around their river island, finally free of their curses. So, ultimately, my answer is no. I can't survive 100 days as a cursed pirate crew in RimWorld. Can you? Have you attempted the pirate run with all curses active? If so, definitely let me know how it went. I hope you enjoyed the premise of the video and my telling of the story of my cursed crew. A subscription, like, or comment about the ideas you want to see in the future would all be great ways to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.